COVID-19 exposed the exploitation of college student athletes.
The relationship between colleges and their student athletes tends to be fair and morally acceptable.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to the American Religious Town Hall program. I'm James Weingardner, sitting in for Pastor Lutz in our COVID edition. We have cut down the number of panelists for social distancing purposes, but we're happy to have today an opportunity to discuss important topics with these panelists. And now they'll introduce them to you by themselves to you, starting with the person on my right.
I'm Bishop Michael OLSON, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Carl TROVALL. I'm Professor of History and Ethics at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
And I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm the Senior Minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
And we're tremendously happy that each of you are here, and we have people who can still come during the COVID crisis. A number of people were unable to make it, so we're glad that you're here. Colleges and universities have been accused of taking advantage of student athletes, but now the evidence may be undeniable. Some say a June article in the Los Angeles Times made the point that the COVID-19 pandemic clarified the extent to which colleges are willing to look past the best interest of their student athletes to make money. With many, if not all schools, still planning all that time to hold many of their academic classes online, NCAA Division I schools lifted their spring moratoriums on athletics in early June, allowing for sports to resume in person. Team weight training and conditioning began days later, and in-person practices soon after. Almost immediately, reports began to come that student athletes in several schools had tested positively for the virus. Some schools shut things down temporarily. Some athletes complained, either as individuals or as whole teams, as was the case with the 30 members of the football team at UCLA. The article asked, if academics are safer remotely, how can sports, especially contact sports, be okay? The article also raised the question of racism, citing the country's sordid history of using the bodies of black people and noting that a large percentage of college athletes are African American. As with everything regarding the pandemic, decisions and circumstances are very fluid, and things have changed since that late June article was written. And they may well change again before this program's aired. But these questions remain. Number one, did the COVID-19 pandemic expose a problem in college athletics deeper than the mere treatment of a virus? Two, have college sports programs turned into sources of exploitation? And if so, what are the moral implications for schools and their supporters? And three, should student athletes who receive free education, expert training, and good medical care be able to protest or withhold their services if they feel participation is dangerous in a way they had not anticipated when they signed their letters of intent? This sounds like an interesting subject, so let's begin with Tony.
It is a very interesting topic. As a former athlete who played college basketball, when I read this, it is troubling to know that the NCAA Division I school lifted their spring moratorium. I think this is a topic that speaks to the wisdom of the decision. If it's not safe for students to be in class, as the moderator mentioned, how could it be safe for athletes to be on a basketball court or a football field where it is literally impossible to avoid contact? So this is a significant problem. When I read this, I know there's a racial component here that is mentioned. The question is, could this be racism? I'm not ready to say that it's racism, but I'm certainly ready to say that this is a topic of greed, and we can talk about the race component. I think that's a worthy conversation because a lot of athletes are African American athletes. But I do think that greed is a problem here. In fact, Sally Jenkins writes, she's a columnist who writes for the Washington Post, and in her article, she highlights, I want to just quote a couple of these things. She says that some of the colleges have $50 million stadiums. They upgrade consistently. Indoor waterfalls in some of these college campuses. Ballooning salaries. Locker rooms are designed to resemble first-class luxury airlines. And so she goes on and she really just prosecutes this case against these wealthy college campuses that are really pushing and trying to get the athletes to play. And she basically says that it's one thing that has been exposed, and to which I agree, is that there's a shopping addiction as well. And the bill comes due on all of these expenditures, and to encourage the athletes to go out there and play is a major problem. I cannot remember the person's name, the athlete's name, forgive me for that, but I do remember seeing the television where this one African-American athlete said he was not going to play. He contacted his coach. He told the coach that, hey, he was very afraid about the virus. He has family members, his parents, his grandparents, and he decided not to play. But there is some type of group that's out there where they can join, and to make sure that it's almost like a union or something that they can get involved in to make sure that they're treated correctly. And the coach, to the athlete's surprise, told him, well, you need to come and just clean out your locker and so forth. And he was just pretty stunned. So, COVID-19 is serious, and to encourage people to play, I just think it's not a wise thing. Now, this has the athletes, many of them have used this as leverage, and many are saying, hey, if you want me to play, and not just in light of COVID-19, we need to start splitting the revenue. So that's a whole nother topic, and I think this is something that the athletes are going to start doing.
Very good. Tom?
Thank you. Boy, what a transition. I appreciate it, Tony, because that's exactly where I was going. And I so appreciate your point of view because of your own history, your own experience. I was a high school athlete, but nobody ever wanted me to come play for their college. I think that, I said that things are generally fair and morally acceptable. That's probably an overstatement. What I would prefer to say is something like, the COVID-19 crisis has exposed, I think, what's been going on for a long time, and has enabled a conversation to begin. Because previously, any complaints by athletes were simply met with, hey, you're getting a free education, take advantage of it. Hey, you're getting this. Hey, you're getting that. Sometimes even complaints from fans who are in the kind of the shut up and play camp, which often goes for musicians as well as athletes, that they should not have the ability to speak. because they're getting so much. But the crisis here has enabled now athletes to stand up and say, you know, this is only symptomatic of something that we've been trying to talk about for a very long time. And the conversation is the critical piece. The conversation is where we're growing morally, and colleges and universities are having to examine their own points of view. Boosters, those who contribute large sums of money and feel like they have some say because of that, are having to step back and say, well, you know, it's kind of embarrassing for me to continually be harping that old tried and true university, we got to get out there and continue to win, continue to play, because it is so blatant that, well, we're taking all these precautions for the majority of the students on campus, but athletes are different. Let's get in there, get them in there, get them mixing up and sharing sweat with each other and all of that, and suffering, and so many of them getting sick. Yeah. So I think that that's where we're growing, and this exploitation issue is one that needs to be a part of the conversation about athletics. We cannot just continue to have our, you know, sports talk shows and all of that and say, well, they can't talk. People just want to talk about who's winning and who's losing and what coach is going to get fired next and all of that kind of stuff. We've got to talk about the moral implications of everything we're doing for the people that we're expecting to perform.
Tom, I like to hear you say that, wearing the TCU tie.
That's right.
That's nice. That's
right.
nice. Carl?
That's important. I'm still a fan. Still a fan.
Well, this highlights something. I would come at a little different angle. First of all, I want to say Concordia, because we're in a different division, our students do not receive any scholarships at all for their athletic participation. And we've canceled our sports. The whole division has for the fall, so no one's playing at all in concern for safety for the students, which I was happy to hear that. Good. I mean, it's sad that I know it's really important to athletes to be able to play, and so it kind of hurts the soul. After the decision was made, I was going, good, and then I'm going, well, I don't know if that's good. It's like sad, but okay. I want to flip it a little bit and say, why are any of us surprised? These universities get their funds cut from the state. They don't get as much money. They have to make up money in other areas. I don't know, I've never fact-checked this, but when I was at UT as campus pastor, I believe they said that by the time you hit halftime of a University of Texas game, the whole university has been able to pay for their complete athletics program for every student. In other words, it helps every student in their tuition thing. It also builds alumni donations. And I mean, because alumni, they give to winning teams. I mean, unless they're just pure loyalists, right? And so I don't know why any of us would be so surprised that a university wants to maximize the benefit of the university, both for the students by giving free scholarships. They go to school free. The university gets what they get out of it, and they lower tuition. I mean, if anything, maybe the state should pick up the tab for a lot of the stuff that goes on at the university, so then the pressure isn't so much on athletes. But then I look at our society. I mean, we're sports crazy as a society. Look at the billions of dollars that go into sports. Why would you expect a college to be any different? I just think that it's too high of a standard. Has COVID, I mean, I love what both of you had to say. There are issues, there are problems, but at the same time, I mean, it's a business, and I expect the HEB, this is a grocery store here in Texas, I expect the HEB person to be there to give me food because I need to eat, and they have to go to work. Why would you not expect an athlete who's getting a full ride to show up? And then one other thing, I saw in the news that a number of the athletes, the football players at UT feel actually safer on the field than they do in the classroom because there's so much more protection given them there.
Thank
Okay.
you. Michael?
Oh, I think it's a good topic. I think it's an ends means question, very much so. I think student athletes are, first of all, students, and athletics is a part of their education. It's not something they do in an extracurricular way for the entertainment of spectators. And I think a problem just in general with sports is that everything is driven by the spectator. And we are a nation of spectators, so much so that I think even with loyalty to teams, you see even young people who take part more in things like fantasy sports, and they're interested in players for the sake of a fantasy game than they are for the sport itself, and they're not participating. More of them want to, if you will, own a player in their fantasy league than they do wanting to emulate them. The second question then, I think, also has to do with what is the education that's being offered by our student athletes, for our student athletes, and how is it different from, say, those who are not student athletes? And I think one of the things that has not been talked about is that student athletes have student dorms, especially at these NCAA schools, these big schools. It's very easy to quarantine. It's very easy to control the spread by following basic protocols that people are doing. You have a controlled universe. If they take their classes online, even more so. All right, now they're going to have to curtail socializing away from, but that's part of everybody's life right now. I think that it can be done safely. I mean, the students will arrive earlier in the summer anyway for their training. They can do no contact drills. And I think that this is really the question as far as their safety is concerned, and can it be done well? However, we get lost in then what is exposed is the fact that this is a very big business, and even more than the universities making money on this are your sporting athletics, sporting and athletics apparel, business in general for that all is attached advertising dollars for these athletic games that are coverage, television dollars as well, and also just frankly, as a nation of spectators, we're also a nation that needs distractions from our bigger social problems, which is part of the reason we have the social problems we do, because we're always able to be distracted from what's our responsibility in society. I think that athletics, we cannot reduce athletic education to just being a spectacle, but also how athletics are a part of our education, and especially that of student athletes. Their future employment depends on this. Even if it's not in the pros, it's going to be in the area of education and kinesiology, other these areas where their education is very important for them to flourish. They are receiving an education, all right, and that's being paid for through their work and service as well. So I think I think all of those matters have to be considered. I think the accountability of the NCAA is stringent, and I think we hear of people being caught and they're punished for violations. Now, who is watching the watchdogs is another question, and who's funding the process is another question as well, for the issue of accountability in education.
Tom, I think you had something else to say.
Yeah, just two things. One is, I think it's amazing that out of the Power 5 conferences, 3 of them have canceled fall athletics completely, and a bunch of the lower, less well-known, less well-funded conferences, the same thing. The other thing I wanted to say is, or ask, I wanted to ask Tony, I've had people that are kind of on the outskirts of college athletics say, if you hang around these athletes, the athletes really are owned by the schools. The school tells them everything to do, sets their schedule always. Did you feel that way?
When I play, I mean, it's a tightly ran system, and there are things you can do and things you can't do. And there's a lot of restrictions, but then there's a lot of freedom. I didn't feel confined, but there are certain things that you just can't do. I want to add real quickly as well that from an athlete's perspective, when one of the driving forces of being an athlete is you're performing, but then you have spectators out there, and that is one of the adrenaline is just key. And I'll say more about that.
Thank you. Now, we really appreciate your comment. Let's hear a word from our sponsor.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We've had an engaging conversation about student athletics, and now we have an opportunity to hear recaps from our panelists, and we begin with Michael.
I think college athletics is a part of education, and student athletes are first and foremost students as well as being athletes. Their athletics is part of their education and development as a person. We lose sight of that very much as spectators of their sports. And when money enters in, particularly advertising dollars, it's easy to confuse means and ends. It's important for universities to maintain the integrity of their mission as institutes of higher learning and education, which includes athletics. I think there needs to be a good regulation of where money enters in. I also think that in keeping student athletes in part of their program, we have to recognize their vulnerability to the exposure to those who have other financial interests that would exploit them.
Thank you. One of the things I think the entire conversation that's been spawned by COVID-19 in the athletic, in the realm of student athletes and their relationship with colleges is that we have to face the fact that it's not all great and wonderful. We see a kid who gets a scholarship offer, and they get on TV. Their high school all rallies around them, and a lot of hurrahs. They go. We see them when they're actually performing. There are all sorts of people cheering for them. What has been exposed here is something that lots of people have known about for a long, long time, but it's now more in the forefront that it's not all grand and glorious. It's not the panacea that it is often portrayed to be, and people like us who are responsible for the moral underpinnings of the society need to take into consideration the effect on athletes as people of all the money and all the expectation that is made of them.
Tony?
Yes, I thought a lot about this. I was really blessed to get a full ride scholarship. And when I put myself in some of these athletes' shoes who have been told that you're going to play, we're going to go ahead with the program. I think back on my days, full ride scholarship, dorm paid for, books paid for, and all that. With something like COVID-19, I think I would have said, you can keep it, you know. I wouldn't go out there and play. And as I was saying in the last segment, is that part of the athletics is when you have a craft or skill, you get adrenaline from the crowd. And if the crowd is not there, it for me at least, back in the day, and the older I get, the better I was. So, you know, it just seems to be, you know, kind of flat. And lastly, this same article from 2004 to 2018, the revenue exploded from $3 billion to $14 billion. So athletes certainly should be a part of seeking how and if they should be compensated. Carl? And that's another conversation.
I appreciate what everyone said, and I just want to end on a positive note about how I've loved having student athletes as a professor. And I know we're in a completely different division, but I think you mentioned this, Michael. Athletics are not extracurricular to the university. They are co-curricular. In other words, it is a part of the curriculum that students are engaged in external activities, whether it's athletic or otherwise. And that helps, it's mutually reinforcing in their studies and in their athletics. And I think it's important that people realize that, how important athletics are for universities, wherever they're at. I think it's important to stop the exploitation where it is.
Very good. We thank you so kindly. This is a subject that I know I've thought about many years. I was a scholarship musician. There were no books included in that. Nobody paid that much for our concerts, I think. But it's an important question. I think we really have to ask, how will future generations view us using student athletes without pay? The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the same channel, the American Religious Town Hall stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.